what we saw on Sunday, the tactics worked of pushing out that forward advance element and allowing that individual to scan that AOR and was able to identify where Ryan Wesley Routh was. The question that I have, and I think is what is most unsettling to me, is that well, actually twofold, is why was there not anybody running that wood line out ahead of time with a dog or with a tactical element? The other question that's actually more concerning is if this was a true off the record movement, as the director stated, and that they did not know that he was going to play golf until the morning of, how did Ryan Wesley Routh know to be in that wood line up to 12 hours prior? So where did he get that information, or was he just super lucky? And I seriously doubt that he was just that lucky.
Yeah, it's that question's been asked repeatedly, and you'd like to think, I'm sure they have, that during their questioning that they pose that. Did you just decide to camp out, assuming that there's a high probability that the former president would be playing golf at some point on a nice weekend? Okay, perhaps, but were you conducting surveillance? Did you identify something in the activities? Were you able to see a convoy movement? What was it that created that opportunity for Routh? Are you seeing? And I'm glad you also point up the idea that they weren't sweeping the perimeter. I mean, I think the acting director mentioned that, or admitted that they did not work the perimeter as they should have. And I think he was indicating that perhaps because it was not an official on the record activity, they didn't necessarily have the resources to do that. Are you seeing much of a difference in the aftermath of the second attempt compared to the first in terms of how the Secret Service is dealing with, let's call it the optic, how they're dealing with the public in a sense to demonstrate transparency?
Yeah, I am. If you recall on the last podcast that we were on, I was very critical of the former director, Kimberly Cheadle. After a second, or after, I'm sorry, after an assassination attempt that we hadn't had in 43 years on a Secret Service protectee, she didn't even have the leadership skills to know that she probably should have been on site within 24 hours to assess that situation for herself, instead of go do an ABC News, national news segment where she could defend her actions. And so, I have no defense of her. I'm glad that she had the forethought to resign after such an embarrassing testimony. I will say that I am happy to see the direction and the leadership that has been exhibited by Acting Director Rowe. I believe that he has taken a forward operational stance at getting out ahead of this. I was happy to see that he was on scene on Sunday or Monday, doing his due diligence as the leader of that agency, setting an example for those beneath him. And I think that this time it's a little bit different because, in the first assassination attempt of the former president, the suspect was deceased. So it was hard to gather that information, in an exigent manner, whereas Brian Wesley Ralph is not deceased, and the agency is able to gather, more information in an exigent manner. So I think there are some stark contrast between the responses of the leadership. And is it perfect? It's never going to be perfect, but at the end of the day, I think that they have made some significant strides moving forward to try to rectify the failures of past administrations and past leadership.
Yeah. From your experience and from what you've seen so far, what do you make of Ryan Routh?
I believe that he probably was radicalized due to the divisive rhetoric within the United States. We know that he traveled to the Ukraine. I have questions as to his capabilities, his mental status, and how he was financially able to do the things that he did. What appears to be a professional activist, roaming the United States, appearing at these events, causing confusion or questions and turmoil, and what seems to be a professional agitator. I call to question how in the heck he got to the Ukraine, why he would even go there. I don't believe that he has any formal militarized or military or law enforcement experience. Um, is this guy, I don't want to create any controversy, but why? You know, how did he get so enraged in politics that he felt that this was his only option? And so I'd like to see what his mental capacity is and how long he might be suffering from whatever it is that he's suffering from.
Uh, okay, to that point, to what degree do you think we'll get some transparency in the short term on that? Because there are some, let's just put it this way: there are a lot of theories out there related to Ralph, right? And part of it because he was very prolific on social media. He wrote a lot on social media. People sometimes tend to, I think, when they get on social media, they read something, they go, "Yeah, that makes sense. That's right," and they don't necessarily step back and go, "Okay, well, is the guy a psycho or not?" They're just taking it at face value, and then they're running with it. So there are some scenarios out there being put forward about Ralph and his connections, supposed connections. Who else is behind this? It seems like there's an element that's quickly disappearing down a real conspiracy path. So how soon do you think we might get some transparency on who he actually is, what the issues are, and what his condition is?
Well, I mean, the question really is will we ever really get the truth? I mean, it's been 60 something
Mm,
years since John F. Kennedy was killed. It's been 60 something years since Martin
right.
Luther King was killed, and RFK and Malcolm X and all of these other prolific people that would which I would consider were unifiers. That sometimes that's not exactly what some of the powers that be within the United States government or those entities that support or that are supported by the United States government want. So the question is, would we ever really get the truth anyway? We don't know. I mean, we still don't know who killed. I mean, we still don't know the full truth behind JFK or RFK. Um, so, with this individual in particular, um, I think this is a perfect example of political rhetoric, creating a tinderbox for unstable people to take actions and matters into their own hands because they don't have the mental capacity to be able to decipher what's true and what's not true. I'm curious to see, like I said, how he was supported and what motivated him to want to carry out this attack. Will we get that in an exigent time period? I don't think it'll be too soon. I think it'll be probably after or just before the election because we know sometimes that information is strategically released for purposes that benefit one person or one party over another. So
Yeah.
I don't think it'll be too soon, honestly.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that point. If we actually do get really any transparency, and it's incredibly frustrating for the public, and it creates more of this sort of this murkiness that exists in social media, right? So I think it's incumbent at this stage of the game for the Secret Service, the FBI in particular, to be more forthcoming with the results of any investigation that are engaged in, and if they do that, then the likelihood is that you won't end up having to get a investigation started up on Capitol Hill, where they're
Yeah.
basically butts to nuts on investigations and committee hearings and things. So how about we just cut that off at the pass and say from the Bureau, from Secret Service, here are the findings. It's not a national security issue. Here's what we got. And by the way, maybe it starts a discourse that's more effective about the way that people talk to each other, certainly in politics.